everyone. This is Wes Henson, pastor of the Ridge Church. And the Ridge Church campus is located at 7350 Old Highway 13 in Carbondale, Illinois. And I want to thank you for joining me today for this week's small group Bible study for the week of May the 7th, 2023 at the Ridge Church. Now this is session 4 of our 6-week series that's titled Dealing with Temptation. We began this series learning that when it comes to giving in to temptation, we have no one to blame but ourselves. And then building on that lesson, the point of the following week was that God's provision is always better than what we try to get for ourselves. And then last week, we learned that we can trust God without putting God to the test. So that brings us up to date and gets us ready for our study for today. If you check out the links, you'll discover a printed summary of this week's study, and then I invite you to join us on campus Sunday morning at 9 a.m. as we go into detail. Okay, so let's begin this week's on-the-go Bible study. The session for this week is titled, The Temptation to Place Something Else Before God. And the point of our lesson this week is that the greatest joy comes from exalting God. Now, the world lives with the expectation that we ought to exalt ourselves. That is, look out for ourselves first and foremost. And that is more than just self-preservation. The fact of the matter is that we simply want to look good in front of others. And, you know, if we don't take care of ourselves, if we don't toot our own horn, then who's going to do that? Well, glory belongs to God and God alone. But we're often tempted to make more of ourselves than we should. However, we find our greatest joy when we point to God and not ourselves. So the setting of our study this week is found first off in Matthew chapter 4, verses 8 through 11. And these verses record the third temptation of Jesus. The devil took the Lord to a high mountain and showed him all the world's kingdoms, and he offered Jesus control of all of them in return for the worship of Satan. And then in the Deuteronomy passage, it contains Moses' instructions for the people of Israel before they entered the promised land. And the overwhelming goodness of the land, which was Moses' warning, could tempt them to forget the Lord. So Moses encouraged them to fear the Lord always and give him proper worship. Okay, so let's look at the Matthew passage first. We're in Matthew chapter 4, verses 8 through 11. Verse 8 reads, Again, the devil took him to Jesus to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. And he said to him, I will give you all of these things if you will fall down and worship me. And then Jesus told him, Go away, Satan, for it is written, Worship the Lord your God and serve only him. And then the devil left him, and the angels came and began to serve him, serve Jesus. So Satan is tempting Jesus with something that has already been promised to him. All the kingdoms of the world. So where is the temptation in that? Well, the temptation comes in that Jesus could take the kingdoms of the world now without delay and without going to the cross. Satan often offers us good things, even things promised to us, but he entices us to obtain them in sinful ways. Satan is still very much in the business of idolatry today, and his goal is to get us to worship anything other than God, like money. Now, the idea of financial security is a good thing, and you've got to have money to do it. But if we're not careful, we can pin our hopes on financial security rather than on God. Authority. God uses authority to establish order in this world, but when we pursue power to dominate others for our own selfish gains, we have taken a good gift and made it a god. So Jesus' response to such temptation should be our response as well. Worship the Lord your God and serve only him. Now in these next verses, we're going to see the importance of never forgetting that it is God who is at work in our lives. Let's look at Deuteronomy chapter 6 and verses 10 through 12. Verse 10 reads, "When the Lord your God brings you into the land that he swore to your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that he would give you, a land with large and beautiful cities that you did not build, houses full of every good thing that you did not fill them with, cisterns that you did not dig, and vineyards and olive groves that you did not plant. And when you eat and are satisfied, be careful not to forget the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the place of slavery." So we are continually tempted to make idols, and this was Israel's ongoing problem. The pattern of conquest, the way that the people of Israel would take the promised land, allowed God's people to enter the land and be provided with ready-made facilities in which to live and to work, buildings and vineyards and all of that. However, they would face the danger of resting in these things and losing their reliance and dependence on the one who provided them. Now, here's the truth. Adversity and difficulties don't threaten our walk with Jesus quite like prosperity does. In prosperity, we gradually replace our reliance on God with a reliance on ourselves and what God has provided. And so Moses was reminding the Israelites that God is the one who brought them out of slavery and into freedom. And we too must remember all that God has done and all that God has provided. Okay, in the next verses we're going to see that when we worship God and follow him, we do that which pleases God and blesses us. Verse 13, "So fear the Lord your God and worship him, and take your oaths in his name. Do not follow other gods, the gods of the peoples around you. For the Lord your God is among you, and he is a jealous God. Otherwise, the Lord your God will become angry with you and obliterate you from the face of the earth." So God is a jealous God over those who belong to him. And the temptation that Israel faced as they entered the promised land is that they would be tempted to chase after the things of the world. And so to avoid this, they were exhorted to do three things. Number one, they were exhorted or commanded or warned to fear God. Fear is a natural response when God reveals himself, and it causes us to bow down in his presence, which leads us to the second exhortation: worship God. We are drawn to worship God, who inspires respect and fear because of his greatness and sovereignty. And then the third exhortation is to take oaths in God's name. Israel was to root its integrity in God alone. A life spent in worship and exaltation of the one who loves us deeply will always lead to a life of satisfaction. Okay, let's apply this lesson. Let's live it out. Let's see what we can pull out and apply and live out this week that's coming up. So Satan was trying to tempt Jesus to exalt himself in a way that wasn't right. Jesus certainly deserves our praise and exaltation, but he wouldn't seek it in a way that was outside of his Father's plan. So how can you make much of God rather than yourself? Three applications. Number one, expose your idols. Consider where you turn when life becomes difficult. Where do you look for satisfaction and joy? And identify those as idols and turn from trusting them, choosing instead to place your trust solely in God. Number two, give thanks. Write a prayer to God, thanking God for all the ways that he has worked in your life, and be specific about what he has done for you. And then number three, meet together. Meet with one or two other believers of the same gender and talk openly about those areas where you might be tempted to look to someone or something other than God, and then agree to stand together and support one another in making God the sole object of your devotion and worship. Okay, let's wrap it all up for this week. So glory belongs to God alone, but we're often tempted to make more of ourselves than we should and to shine the glory on ourselves. However, we find our greatest joy when we point to God and not ourselves. So if you click on the links, you'll discover a printed summary of this week's study. And then I invite you to join us on campus at the Ridge Church this Sunday morning at 9 a.m. as we go into greater detail. Bye for now, everyone.